I like to think that I'm more than my thoughts, but I may be wrong. Hi, my name is Mae Woodson, and you are listening to I May Be Wrong, But. And today we are talking about a quote from my dear friend, Mr. William Shakespeare. We are talking about, this is from Hamlet, "Thus conscience does make cowards of us all." So I was thinking about conscience, and I was thinking about like times that I felt guilty. And I think the deepest guilt I've ever felt in my life, I was probably about 8 years old, I would say. And I loved a magazine. I was so excited when my mom would get a catalog, even if she went through it first, then she let me go through it. I would go through any magazine, a home decor. I loved Pottery Barn Teen, of course, even though I wasn't a teen. I loved clothing mags, but I also really especially loved, I can't even think of what the store was called, the party store magazines, where if you were having your birthday party, you could order the goodies for your friends from, and it was super cheap. And so one of those magazines came in the mail, and my favorite thing to do would be turn the TV on, and I would lay back on our sectional in our basement, and I would go through and I'd circle all the things I'd pick for my hypothetical party that I was not having at 8 years old, but that was my favorite thing to do after school. One of them, other than write. And so one day this magazine came in, and I was trying to go through and circle the things that I would want, but my normal pen wasn't sticking because it was a cheap magazine. It's kind of that material where if you got it wet and you touched it, the color would come off. You know what I'm talking about? So I got a Sharpie, which children should legally not have access to Sharpies because that's just a bad idea. But I got a Sharpie. And so I'm sitting there going through this party magazine, and I'm just circling. Ooh, limbo bar? Absolutely. Oh my goodness, I can give all my friends rainbow colored sunglasses as a parting gift. Yep, we'll be doing that. I go through and I was circling exactly what I wanted, and I had this Sharpie, and I'm feeling kind of bougie, and so I was wielding that thing. And one time I just made a circle so big, I was so excited about. My Sharpie went off to the side, and it drew a line down our sectional. And this was a fairly new sectional at the time. It was big, but it was the basement couch, and our basement was the place you hung out. We had a living room upstairs. We called it the green room because everything was green. But the basement was where everyone hung out. That's where we hung out every single night. It's where my dad hung out. That's where you hang out. That was the couch, not just a couch in the house. It was the couch. And I freaked out. I was, oh my God, what did I just do? I just ruined our favorite seating arrangement in the house. But it was one of these back cushions, so I just took it and I turned it around. And I felt really guilty about it for probably about a month. I would say I thought about it every day, especially right before I went to bed. I couldn't stop looking at it. I couldn't stop staring at this one couch cushion. But then around probably 3 months, I think I forgot about it. And I think there's this curve with guilt where it's really bad, really bad, really bad, and it like wanes, and then if something happens, it'll spike back up. And then one day my mom found it, and I was really upset she found it because we were about to play We Fit together in the basement, and she saw it and she was like, "What was this?" And I instantly started crying, and all my guilt came tripping back in. And my punishment was I had to tell my dad, and my dad was the scarier of the parents. He's not a scary person, but as a kid, you're like terrified to tell your father when you've done something wrong. So I had to tell him, and I did tell him, and everything was fine. I was fine, but that is the time I remember in my body feeling like guilty and having like my conscience talking to me. Yeah. So let's get back to Shakespeare. Something about Hamlet. I don't know if you know the story of Hamlet. So Hamlet is about the Prince of Denmark. His father is killed, and very early on, we get to see his dad comes back as a ghost and talks to him, and he's like, "Hey dude, you need to avenge me," yada yada. And up until this point, Hamlet's life is going pretty well, and then Hamlet becomes like your typical anxious teen, but Hamlet was in love with Ophelia. Ophelia, I think, is an underrated woman in the Shakespeare verse. I think everybody wants to play Helena or Hermia, or even Beatrice, which I would love to play any of those. I'm not a Hermia because I'm too tall, but I would love to play Ophelia. It is so fun to get to play a crazy person. Spoiler alert, Ophelia, who is Hamlet's lover, goes crazy because all of a sudden this guy who was like devoted to her is not being nice to her anymore. What the heck happened? And so she gets to go crazy, which playing a crazy person is so much fun. I think it's because I have to be so sane every day of my life. I got to play Stephanie and POTUS, last year, and the time of my life playing a girl who accidentally takes some scary drugs and goes crazy. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Anyway, so then Hamlet basically creates this plan that he is going to get revenge for his dad because Claudius, his uncle, has killed his dad and has married his mother. So he is now the king. But it turns out Claudius is also plotting on Hamlet, trying to get him sent away to school, and all this stuff happens. So we've got a brooding teenager, dead dad, all that going on. So that's Hamlet. That's what we're talking about. Our quote again today is, "Thus conscience does make cowards of us all." And again, that's just talking about how, which I guess that's not necessarily scary, but I was thinking it more so in the sense of guilt and fear. And so that falls into our month of October realm because it's talking about living inside of your brain and how we can torment ourselves. I think that's an interesting concept. But I have some fun facts for you on Shakespeare. So I don't know if you know about the lost years. The lost years are a significant gap in Shakespeare's biography. So this is after the birth of his twins, which was in 1585. There's no records, none anywhere of his life until he appears on the London theater scene in 1592. So a bunch of people, scholars, have offered theories about what might have happened to fill this 7-year gap. And so some people think he was a country schoolmaster, some people think he was a soldier, or some people think that he was even in hiding for poaching deer from a local squire's estate. Who's to say? Maybe he just took time off to be with the kids. You know what I mean? Maybe he wanted to take time to write and figure life out. But there's this weird gap in his life that we don't really know what happened. Next up, he had a shotgun wedding. So Shakespeare was 18 and he married Anne Hathaway, who was 26. Isn't that wild? And already pregnant. So that's probably why the speed happened. They ended up having 3 children. They had a daughter, Susanna, and then the twins, which were Judith and Hamlet. And his only son, Hamlet, died young at 11. And scholars believe this great personal tragedy influenced the later works, particularly Hamlet, which we're talking about today. But there's no definite proof. There's no definite proof. So don't kill me if that's wrong. Crazy though, Shakespeare has no direct descendants. His bloodline ended with his grandchildren. However, there are descendants of his sister Joan who are still alive today. Shakespeare was a businessman, so there's this idea of the starving artist that in order to do what you love, you have to work all the time and not get paid, and sometimes that does happen and sometimes it works out great for you, sometimes you starve for forever. But Shakespeare was a very smart businessman, so he was never starving. He was part owner of the Globe Theater, and he was a prominent figure in his acting company, and so his business dealings and property investments in Stratford-upon-Avon made him a very wealthy man. I've been to Stratford-upon-Avon. What a cute little city. I've seen the best play I've ever seen. It was a production of Richard III. It was absolutely amazing. I get chills when I think about it. It's the best Shakespeare I've ever seen. Of course, in Stratford-upon-Avon, it would be amazing. But what a quaint little town. I went to Stratford-upon-Avon with about 1 hour of sleep. When I was in Oxford, my friends and I loved to go out dancing. So we were out dancing quite late, and then we went back, slept very briefly, and then we got on a bus from Oxford to Stratford-upon-Avon. And we carried our little friend Emmy around because Emmy was not feeling too hot from the night before, but it was such a fun day. Okay, something you should know is that Shakespeare was a tax evader. So even though he was rich and not a starving artist like we just talked about, records show that Shakespeare was prosecuted for evading taxes and for hoarding grain during a time of famine in his hometown. This is a practice that's called engrossing. And then finally, you definitely already know this, but I like to talk about it. He coined more than 1,700 words, and many of them are still used today. He would do this by combining words, changing nouns into verbs, borrowing from other languages. So words like eyeball, swagger, and gossip were all either created or just first recorded in his works. Can you imagine being a person who creates words Okay, so back to our quote of the day. I'll read it to you one more time. I know I've been doing a lot of talking since then. Thus, conscience does make cowards of us all. So we're going to be talking about conscience and the idea of being in your head and narrating your own life, let's say. That's what I'm getting at, and feeling guilty. And so the first piece of media I want to talk about is a song today. Today we are starting off with Liability by Lorde. This song is from what I think was the best album of 2017. Lorde released Melodrama in 2017, and I think it's one of the greatest albums of my time. I think you should listen to it. My dad also agrees, and my dad's like a rock guy. So if my dad says it, you have to believe him, right? Liability talks about, I'll tell you the quote. You should listen to it, but I'll read some for you. So I guess I'll go home into the arms of the girl that I love, the only love I haven't screwed up. She's so hard to please, but she's a forest fire. I do my best to meet her demands, play at romance. We slow dance in the living room, but all that a stranger could see is one girl swaying alone, stroking her cheek. They say, you're a little much for me, you're a liability. You're a little much for me, so they pull back, make other plans. I understand, I'm a liability. Get you wild, make you leave. Oh, so sad and beautiful. I think it talks about the idea of your mind holding you prisoner, because the first half of the song, it's so beautiful. It talks about point of view. So I guess I'll go home into the arms of the girl that I love. We're all imagining, oh my goodness, Lorde has a new girlfriend. But it turns out she is the only girl that she loves, and the only love she hasn't screwed up is herself. And it gets you into this narrative of like in your head, oh my gosh, do all my friends only like me because I throw the best parties, because I make cool music, because people know my name? Why do my friends like me? Oh my gosh, should I not go out anymore? Should I not talk to anybody else? It's like this spiral, the snowball effect of getting into your own head and being like, oh my gosh, what in the world am I even doing? And I think it talks about how being in your own head can ruin things for you. So that is Liability by Lorde, from one of the greatest albums, if not the greatest album of 2017. The next thing I want to talk about is the movie, which I actually watched for the first time this year, which is Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption is about a guy named Andy. He's a successful banker, and he was wrongly convicted of murdering his wife and her lover and sentenced to life in Shawshank State jail. And so the story is narrated by another inmate who becomes his closest friend. And I think this talks about, if we're thinking about your conscience or your mind like trapping you into something and making you a coward or making you feel some sort of way, this is literally being trapped in a prison for something you didn't do. So his conscience is clean. He knows he didn't murder his wife. He knows that, but all of these other people think that he did. And he's being held in one place and he can't do anything about it. The quote I want to start off with is, I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living or get busy dying. And that's a quote about conscience and making the choice to actively fight for life and freedom or to passively accept your fate. I think if you sit in that guilty conscience, or what Lorde was just singing about, like that, the idea that like nobody likes me, this narrative in your head, you're never going to really get anywhere, right? What do you have to claw yourself out if not yourself? Right? If you have no tools around you, there's no one to help you. The only thing you have is yourself. So if you're not going to use yourself, how the heck are you getting out? You're not. You're not, buddy. I just wanted to stop and define conscience so we actually know what we're talking about, because I think we can say that word a lot and it's hard for me to say. I don't know why I have a hard time, but we can get caught with what it really is. So conscience is a noun. It's the inner feeling or voice viewed as acting as a guide to rightness or wrongness of one's behavior. So he had a guilty conscience about his actions. And someone's like, it's like the little guy in Pinocchio, the little cricket that's, hey, what are you doing there? So yeah. Okay. Some more quotes from Shawshank. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. And no good thing ever dies. This is Andy's core philosophy. I think that's what motivates him to go out. And it makes me think of Emily Dickinson. Hope is a thing with feathers, which I'll read to you just because it just came to my mind. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all. And the sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Beautiful. And in response to that poem, I actually wrote a poem. It's called The History and Social Influence of Hope. Hope is a thing with drawstring pants. When you enter early adulthood, if the birthday counts as an entrance, some are exits, several things find you. Congratulations if you've made it this far. Some are already in the other room. The first thing may have already found you. Perhaps it found you in the high school bathroom in line with the pale green stalls, or maybe perhaps you were an overachiever and found it in the brass section of middle school band. That thing is hope. With a nearly developed brain and decent control over your limbs, everyone says this is the best time of your life. Hope would agree, as it can walk beside you through this part of the journey, with a red whistle around its neck like a gym teacher, walking you through running the mile. It's almost over. I don't know when hope leaves. Teachers have this idea that one day you no longer need them, but somewhere before the final lap is over, he is gone. And your runtime doesn't matter unless it matters to you. And what you're wearing doesn't matter unless it matters to you. And you don't matter unless you matter to you. Yeah, that's my poem, The History and Social Influence of Hope. But back to Shawshank, there's one more quote for you here. They send you here for life, and that's exactly what they take. The part that counts anyway. And that's by Red. And I think it goes back to the same thing of conscience making you a coward. I think things can take your life that are out of your control, but there are some things that can take your life that you're letting. For example, humans nowadays, it's estimated that you will spend 9 years of your life scrolling. 9 years of your life scrolling? That made me put a timer limit on my TikTok real quick. I don't want to waste 9 years of my life scrolling. Can you imagine if I was born without phones? I'd waste my time on other things, but it wouldn't be scrolling on TikTok. So anyway, I think it's again just saying like your mindset and who you are and what you do can affect your life and how much of it you get to live. Okay, now we're going to talk about a book. And this is probably one of the most shocking books I've ever read. This is Diary of an Oxygen Thief, and it's by Anonymous. So I bought it in a bookstore in Miami. I had seen it around, and it's just a snowman on the cover. It's real thin. And I probably read it a bit too young, to be honest with you. I love that I was reading. My parents always encouraged me to read. I'm a big reader, but this one might have been a bit too young. So I was shocked when I was looking this up. The Goodreads rating is so low. And I will say the book is appalling. There's a major content warning here for you. The book is shockingly bad, some of the things that happen. However, I couldn't put it down. The narrator is a terrible person. He is a bad guy. And so it's a novel by an anonymous writer written in a confessional first person style. And it follows this unnamed Irish advertising executive who enjoys emotionally abusing women. And so he talks about his tactics and often getting involved with making women fall in love with him and then breaking their hearts. So the oxygen thief is what the narrator calls himself due to his conscience, his feelings of self-loathing and unworthiness. There's no direct quote in this that aligns with the quote we're talking about today. When I was thinking about conscience and the idea, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about this novel because it's one of the only novels I can think of that I've read where the narrator's such a bad person. Of course, sometimes we'll have the reveal that, oh, the person you trusted did something bad, but this guy's a bad guy and he's gonna tell you. And so some of the quotes that I wanted to talk about, the idea was to create a sort of lasagna of pain. Now I love lasagna, so of course I love this image. I'll continue. Another one was hurt people more skillfully. An expert heartbreaker knows the effect of each incision. The blade slips in barely noticed. The pain and the apology delivered at the same time. Oof, you can tell this guy's kind of crazy. Oh, I see why this writer published it anonymously, because you wouldn't want people to start mixing up this person's thoughts are my thoughts. And maybe it's true, but another quote for you is, they say the sea is actually black and it merely reflects the blue sky above. So it was with me. I allowed you to admire yourself in my eyes. I provided a service. I listened and listened. You stored yourself in me. And then the last one, this is probably the scariest one. I liked hurting girls, mentally, not physically. I never hit a girl in my life. The one thing is I got off on it. I really enjoyed it. It's like when you hear serial killers say that they feel no regret, no remorse for all the people they killed. I was like that. So this book I think is an interesting read. I think even if you don't love it, it's, as a writer, interesting to get that deep into the head of a person, especially a bad person. And there's never really a point where you're rooting for them, but you do want to know what they're going to say next. And so it's interesting to read a point of view where somebody knows they're guilty and they keep doing it anyway. His conscience, his moral guide is a little bit different than everybody else's. In that same vein, I wanted to talk about another book, which is called I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which pretty recently was made into a movie. So I actually bought I'm Thinking of Ending Things on the same Miami trip where I got this other book. I didn't actually go to Miami. I was in Miami for a layover before I went with my friends on a 2-day cruise. But I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I bought this at that Miami bookstore and I read it. And then I made all of my friends read it. And I have to say, I don't think we fully got the ending. We were in high school. We all really liked it. But then I can remember sitting in my friend's basement on the carpeted floor and just talking about what we thought the ending meant. And I didn't realize how good my life was. I had a friend group of girls who wanted to sit around and talk about books for fun. Like, how cool is that? You never really get that again. But I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a psychological thriller and horror novel. It's by a Canadian author, which is Ian Reid. And it is known for its unsettling atmosphere, philosophical dialogue, and shocking surrealist ending. I think I enjoyed this book so much because it gets very poetic in nature, and I love writing that's a little poetic. I don't want you to speak in poem to me. I don't think I'd be into that if a guy was doing sonnets for me. But a little bit of poetry everywhere is nice. It's almost little sprinkles on the cake. You don't need a ton of it, but just a little bit of it is a nice texture, I would say. So this story is narrated by an unnamed young woman who is on a road trip with her new boyfriend, and they go and see his parents. But then some weird time warp stuff happens while they're at the house, and they end up at the guy's old high school. It just gets weird. I watched the movie recently, and the movie's good and interesting. I actually did watch that movie, even though I normally books I've really liked. I don't like to watch things. I did watch it. It definitely is like weird. So if you're okay being in a weird mood, I'd say it's a good watch. I liked reading it better than watching it, but that's almost always the case with me. But the first quote I wanted to talk about is, sometimes a thought is closer to truth, to reality, than an action. You can say anything, you can do anything, but you can't fake a thought. I think that relates directly to what we're talking about. You can't fake your conscience, right? I can be thinking something and I can say something totally different to you. For example, there's this one girl I worked with at my company, and I was really excited because when I started, it was largely men and they hired a bunch of women, and I was so thrilled to work with women. I'm such a girl's girl. I have a bunch of guy friends, but I'm a girl's girl through and through. And it turned out not as well as I was hoping it would. And there's one girl that I particularly did not get along with, and she would say stuff to me and I would just think to myself, how can I ever listen to you talk again? But then I would smile and say to her, oh my goodness, thank you so much for that. It's really helpful. And you can totally fake what you say. You can also fake what you do. Even when you're upset with somebody, you should still do nice things for them. Even when you're upset with somebody, you should always try and do nice things for them. But you really can't fake what's in your head. What's in your head is just going to come out, and that is your conscience. That is your moral guide. That's who you are in your heart. You can portray yourself differently. You can mold yourself like clay, like a stop motion Coraline, to show the world exactly what you want to see. It can be very curated, like nowadays how everyone's Instagram is curated. But you can't curate your thoughts. You can train them over time, try and reframe your mindset, but that's really who you are in there. So I like that quote. And then another one for you is, we're never inside someone else's head. We can never really know what someone else's thoughts are. And it's thoughts that count. Thought is reality. Actions can be faked. That's in the same vein. And the next quote is, I think what I want is for someone to know me. Really know me better than anyone else, and maybe even me. Isn't that why we commit to one another? I love that quote. It reminds me of the concept that, I think this comes from a movie, but I couldn't tell you what movie. The idea that we commit life to one another because obviously we love that person, but we want to be known. And I always say, if I didn't tell my mom, it didn't happen. I call my mom every day of my life. I'm so lucky to have a mom that I'm so close with. But if I haven't told my mom, the reality is I probably haven't told anybody. The other day, I was walking around at work and I was not in a great mood, so I didn't have a smile on my face. This guy drives by me and he rolls his window down and he was like, "Put a smile on that pretty face." And I realized I didn't tell anybody. I ended up telling my mom 2 days after it happened that if I had never told my mom, it's almost like that thing never happened to me, right? Without being seen, it's almost if an apple falls off a tree and no one's in the forest, does it make a sound? So it's part of the reason why we commit to others and we love each other so much, because we want to make sure that we're real. Okay, another one is, but isn't being alone closer to the truest version of ourselves when we're not linked to another, not diluted by their presence and judgments? And they do say you're the makeup of the 5 people you spend most time with. So I could see how sometimes I see myself doing things and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just pulling a Charlotte. I'm just pulling a Casey right now. I'm doing things that I learned from somebody else. But that's the beautiful thing. I think of it more so, for me, I think it's a positive thing. I feel like I'm a scrapbook of everyone I love. Like, for example, if you're watching this, you can see, but on my gallery wall in my living room, I have a postcard hanging. It's framed from when I got dinner with my friends who we all lived in California together, but now they all live in New York, and I met them in New York for dinner. And then I have this flower picture. It's actually from the 1920s, but I got that on a road trip with my mom. Then I have this painting of a sad ballerina girl that I got at a random antique store with my first boyfriend. Not that that painting normally makes me think about him, but just like looking at my wall, there's all these little parts of my life, and I feel like that's me, and I like that. I like that I learn things from other people in my life, so I think that's positive. Anyway, that quote's still beautiful. But reading on, people talk about the ability to endure anything and everything, to keep going, to be strong. But you can do that only if you're not alone. That's always the infrastructure life's built on, a closeness with others. Alone, it all becomes a struggle of mere endurance. Oh, you know, I haven't read this book since high school, but that does feel a bit like my life right now. Every time I open my phone, people always say this, and I was like, yeah, my life's like that too, but now my life is really like this. People always say every time I open my phone, somebody else is engaged. That's my life right now. Literally my life all the time. And it's really exciting for all my friends who I know, like personally, which I shouldn't be following people I don't know personally, but you know, neither here nor there. But that does feel like my life. Every time I open my phone, either somebody's getting engaged. Today, one person got engaged, one person announced her first baby, right? Which these are all exciting things, but it can be hard if you are in, what I hate this phrase, but I'll say it, a season of singleness where it is like endurance. And I was talking to my friend Casey, this was about 2 years ago now, and I was like, yeah, I just want a boyfriend because I have this big audition today and I'm curling my hair, I'm putting in all my makeup, I'm gonna have to drive there, and I'm gonna have to stop and pick up my headshots. But if I had a boyfriend, he could run and pick up my headshots now. I already paid for them, like I just need him to go and get them. Or I would love, if I'm running late from work, he could just pick up dinner, or dinner could be ready when I'm home, and vice versa. Like I would do that for him. If he's having a long day, if he needed me to do whatever, I would do it. But it's like you have somebody on your team. And she said to me, Caroline, I think you should make a LinkedIn post because what you're looking for is an executive assistant, not a boyfriend. Which she's so funny. And that's kind of true. It is easier to do life when you have somebody on your team. That can be your family member, your best friend, your boyfriend. It doesn't have to be a romantic partner, but it can be. It's easier to do life when somebody else is on your team. And that's all I have to say on that. And then my last quote is, people like to think of themselves as points moving through time. But I think it's probably the opposite. We're stationary and time passes through us, blowing like cold wind, stealing our heat, leaving us chapped and frozen. Yeah, that's just a great quote. I don't necessarily agree with that. This is, again, a person with a more negative inner mindset. I can see how a lot of your life you stay the same as you go through, but I think it's just a well-written quote. So that is, I'm thinking of ending things. You can read the book or watch the movie. I, of course, recommend to read the book. But just talking a little bit more about our quote of the day, which was, as a reminder, in case we forgot, thus conscience does make cowards of us all. I think, on a final note, it can be easy to stop yourself from doing anything because you're in your head about it. It can be easy to be like, oh, I'm not the kind of girl who goes to the gym, so I'm not going to make a change in my life and go to the gym. I don't have clothes to wear to the gym, so why would I go to the gym? I don't like getting up early. Why would I do that before work? I don't have enough time in my day. I got to do this. There's a lot of things you can do in your head that will stop you before you start. And I think that's talking about being a coward. This idea that the nagging in your head will stop you before you start. And sidebar, my mom sent me a reel, an Instagram reel, which I don't consume those unless sent to me. But it was an Instagram reel that was, they say that women who have mothers who nag them are way more likely to be successful. And there was some number in it that proved that it made you more successful. And my mom said, basically thank me for making you successful because I nagged you all the time. But I do think it's true. I have a nagging conscience, and I don't know if that's my mother's voice in my ear or just my own, the way I was wired. But I do have this voice in my head, oh, because you're going for a walk right now, you should take out the trash because the trash is right there and then you'll get it done. Oh, you have 20 minutes right now, you should go on a walk to get in your steps. Oh, you're making your lunch, you might as well put another round of vegetables in there so you get all your stuff for the day. Oh, you're going to bed, but you should set out your workout clothes so you actually get up. And I always say this, but the hardest part of anything is just starting. The hardest part of working out, I keep using that metaphor, but the hardest part of working out is getting up and walking to the gym, getting in your car to go to the gym. Once you're there, you're gonna do it. You're gonna do the class, you're gonna get on the treadmill, you're gonna do whatever, right? The hardest part of writing a book is starting, is coming up with an idea and actually putting the pen to paper. Once you start, life gets so much easier, right? The hardest part of going out on a first date is walking into the restaurant and shaking their hand or giving them a hug, what have you. The hardest part is always going to be starting. Once you get yourself there, you can do it. So I think the way for us to heed Shakespeare's writing and not let our conscience make us cowards is just to start and reframing your mindset of, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Oh my gosh, you shouldn't do this. Oh my gosh, why would you have done that? Into, okay, how can I do what I want to do? How can I use what I've previously done to change my future? How can I do something different so I don't feel that way again? How can I change my life for the better and just start the thing that I want? Because it would be a shame to waste your life being scared or feeling upset about who you are, feeling guilty when you could just be the person you want to be today and tomorrow. But I may be wrong. My name is Caroline Mae Woodson. Thanks for listening.